Instacart is on a mission to have you not leave the couch this basketball season, because between the pregame rituals and the postgame interviews, it can be difficult to find time for everything else. So let Instacart take care of your game day snacks or weekly restocks and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes, because we hear it's bad luck to be hungry on game day. So download the Instacart app today and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Service fees apply for 3 orders in 14 days. Excludes restaurants.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 91 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
I'm good, man. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm definitely doing better than you.
Yeah, I'm trying to rebound from a pretty bad cold.
Yeah, bronchitis. You've been laid up for a little while.
Yeah, not good, man, but I'm here.
It was up in the air as to whether we'd even be able to get an episode out this week, but we're going to. Gibby's playing hurt, and
I'm down a little bit.
We'll make it through. All right, Gibbs, we've got some Patreon shout outs to give.
All righty.
Nancy Ann Gwynn, who's been a really great Patreon supporter. She actually upped her donation to higher than our highest level, which is very much appreciated. We had Mary L. McFarland.
Thank you.
Megan Cartwright.
Hey, thanks, Megan.
Kim Gall. Christy Hole. Carrie Peterson.
Thank you, Bo.
Megan Maddox.
Thank you.
Daniel Schumer.
Schumer. Yeah.
Christy Pierce.
Hey, thanks, Christy.
Becky Jones.
That's an easy name.
It is. Jamie Williams, also easy name. A lot of easy names.
Yeah.
Heather Benjamin. Claire Collins.
Hey, Claire.
Callum Neepsey.
Hey, Callum Neepsey. That's an interesting name, that
it
Neepsey
is.
Part.
Callum. Well, I think Callum is a really cool name.
That's what I was going to say too, but I just want to, because I knew you'd say Callum, I wanted to go with Nipsey.
I think it's Neepsey, but
or Neepsey.
It could be. You could be right. I don't know.
Either way.
Jason Layfield.
Hey, Jason.
Michelle Heritage. She's
got some history behind her. Heritage.
Again, there's no T in there.
There should be, though. Is what I'm trying to say.
I feel like you think I'm saying the name wrong, like I've left letters out because you want it to say Heritage.
I wanted to say what I wanted to say.
I know that about you, and I appreciate that. Jocelyn Santa Rosa.
Hey, Jocelyn.
Bobby Girl.
Hey, Bobby Girl. What's up?
Which you could sit around all day trying to figure out what that one means.
Yeah, it's Bobby's girl, man.
Karen Washington.
Hey, thank you.
Angeli Hamilton.
There were some presidential names there.
Washington and Hamilton.
Exactly.
And I actually really like this name, Angeli. I like the way it's spelled. It's spelled with a J. It's really cool and different.
Yeah.
Kelly Ringel.
Hey, Kelly.
And Danny Jordan. So we appreciate all that new Patreon support. And then if we go back into the vault, Gibbs, this week we selected Jason Chandler. Jason's been with us for a long time supporter of the show, and we appreciate that. We appreciate all the people that continue to support us month after month, and now we're saying year after year. You know, we'll be going into our 3rd year. Actually, our anniversary is right about now. I didn't look it up. I think our first episode, Gibbs, came out at the end of November 2016.
I think you're right.
So we're right around our 2-year anniversary.
We are. We're getting there.
We had some PayPal support as well. Ted Perry, big friend of the show.
Yeah, thanks, Ted.
Brian Monroe, Jennifer Winkler.
Thank you all.
And Chris Wilder.
He's a wild person.
He's a wild one.
Van Wilder.
So we have to say happy Thanksgiving to everyone who celebrated that. Hope everybody got to spend time with their friends, their family, had some good food, at least had a day off. if nothing else.
Most people had day off. Not everybody, though.
Not everybody.
I know I had to go to the pharmacy on Thanksgiving, and they were open. And
Some of these pharmacies are open 365, 24/7.
yeah, you just like using numbers.
I do.
Yeah, good thing I'm a savant with numbers.
You are a savant.
I just added all those numbers up.
And they came up to what?
Well, yeah, I'm on medication.
I was
right
going to
now.
say, you're on a lot of cold medicine, different types of things. So it could be a very...
This cough syrup is really tasty.
It could be a very interesting episode. What I thought was great was that you put it in a flask, because you don't see that a lot.
Well, if you're going to do cough syrup, do it right, man.
Most people just carry it around in the prescription bottle that it comes in.
Yeah, why do that, man?
But to use a funnel and actually put it in a flask that you carry in your pocket, that's pretty...
It looks fancy that way, because I'm a fancy guy.
That's a pretty fancy move.
Yeah.
Gibbs, we have to talk about the arrests made in the Roden murders, the Pike County murders.
Yeah, big news, man.
Yeah, it was huge. A lot of people have reached out to me, and obviously it's fairly close to where we live, close enough that there was a lot of coverage on our local news. And as soon as I saw it, obviously I was glued to the television, couldn't take my eyes off of it. But I had to go back and re-listen to our episode and confirm that we did in fact talk about, as persons of interest, this family that was arrested.
Yeah, we did.
And we talked about them, quite a bit as being viable suspects or persons of interest.
Yeah.
This Wagner family. And details are still coming out, but apparently it had a lot to do with custody,
right,
of one of the children that one of the Wagners had with a member of the Roden family. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. But I'm always interested when one of these unsolved cases gets traction. Right? It's not technically solved, but they've arrested 4 members of this family. And you go back and you think about that episode, right, Gibbs? It was multiple people murdered at essentially the same time at multiple sites. So you knew there was a number of people involved. Well, now if you think about it, you got 4 or 5 members of your family, you can hit multiple sites at the same time. And it'll be fascinating when some of the real details and how they pieced all this together come out. All right, at the time that this episode is out, we also have a new True Crime All the Time. We're talking about Byron David Smith. And this one has been on my list for a long time. It's fascinating. It's a Thanksgiving Day murder, as is the unsolved that we're getting ready to talk about. But the thing about Byron Smith, he killed some teenagers who broke into his house, but he captured it all on audio. And I think that's part of what, makes this case so fascinating. And then you get into the whole discussion around, was this man protecting himself, protecting his home from a break-in, or did he simply execute these 2 teenagers?
Yeah, man, it was a good one.
I think people will find it very fascinating. So check that out if you haven't already. All right, Gibbs, are you ready to get into this episode?
I am ready.
We are talking about the Blount family bombing. So we're down in Texas. But again, this case also happened on Thanksgiving Day. And it was November 28th, 1985. And it occurred in the Hilltop Mobile Home Park, which was located between Lake Worth and Azle, Texas. So you had members of the Blount family, Joe Blount, Angela Blount, Robert Blount, Michael Columbus, Susan Blount, and Carl Ray Blount celebrating Thanksgiving together in the Blount trailer in the suburbs of Fort Worth, Texas. So we have to talk, there's a lot of Blounts here.
There is.
And we kind of have to talk about who they all are. Robert Blount was the son of Susan and Joe. Carl Ray was Joe's brother. Michael Columbus was Carl's estranged son. So they ate Thanksgiving dinner. Ray went home around 5 p.m. Around 9, Susan went to lie down, take a nap, and Joe drove Robert, Angela, and Michael to a convenience store about a half a mile from the trailer park. They bought some snacks, they bought some beer.
Yeah.
Normal stuff that...
Yeah, just to enjoy the rest of the Thanksgiving holiday.
Sure, you've had your turkey.
Yeah.
You've watched your football. Now we're later into the night. Let's go get some snacks. Let's get some beer. We'll sit around, continue the celebration.
Right.
But while they were gone, Susan Blount heard a knock at the front door. She looked out the window, but she didn't see anyone. So she got back into bed. She was taking a nap. When the rest of the family returned from the convenience store, they found a briefcase on the doorstep of the trailer. And apparently Gibbs, the 3 teenagers, were excited about this find. They thought, okay, this is strange, odd, thrilling. We've got a briefcase here. What could be in it? It could be money. It could be treasure. We don't know. You know how teenagers think.
No, of course. How we would think too. What's in it?
That's true. That's true. So they grabbed the briefcase and they took it inside the trailer. 15-year-old Angela opened the latches on the briefcase and it exploded. 3 members of the Blount family were instantly killed in the explosion. Joe was killed. His daughter Angela was killed. And so was Michael Columbus, which was Carl's son and Angela's cousin. Joe Blount was a 44-year-old skilled mechanic. I mentioned that Angela was only 15 years old and Michael Columbus was only 18. And obviously investigators started looking into this right away, but they would be very frustrated because years and years would go by. And at certain points, it seemed hopeless that they would ever be able to solve this case. But at one point, they develop a solid suspect and they arrest this man who police felt planted the briefcase bomb. And their theory was that it all centered around drugs, narcotics, and a plan to take out a dealer. And police thought that the person that planted the bomb targeted the wrong trailer. And the man that they arrested was Michael Roy Toney. But it would take a number of years. Toney was 31 years old in June of 1997, and he was sitting in the Parker County Jail in Weatherford, Texas. He was awaiting a hearing for a burglary that happened in 1993. While he was in jail, he had some conversations with another inmate, Charles Ferris, and the two guys started talking about the Blount family bombing. And it would be Charles Ferris that would go to the authorities and essentially tell them that Michael Toney confessed to him that he had planted the bomb and murdered these people. So police go and interview Toney's ex-wife, and she told prosecutors they were crazy, saying, Michael would never do this. But Toney's ex-wife starts researching the case herself, and I think Gibbs, she starts thinking back to events that transpired in 1985 while she's doing this research. And eventually she takes what she's put together to federal agents and she essentially outlines a theory. And the theory does have Michael Toney planning this briefcase bomb. So it's kind of strange, right? She goes from no way that he could have been involved with this to then thinking back about things that happened, events that we're going to talk about here in a little bit, to all of a sudden she's putting him as the bomber, right, in her theory. So the feds get this research from Toney's ex-wife. They're doing their own follow-up too, right, their own investigation, but it ultimately leads to Michael Toney being indicted on capital murder charges. Now, during this time, Charles Ferris changed his story a couple of times, and he eventually comes out and says that, you know what, he made up this story in an attempt to get out of prison sooner. So at the age of 31, Michael Roy Toney was arrested and charged with capital murder. So let's talk a little bit about Michael Roy Toney. He grew up in Cottonwood, California. It's a small town about 90 miles away from Sacramento. His father left the family early on when he was young, and his mother worked in some local taverns. When Michael was young, his mother brought home a number of men, and these were not good guys. Not at all.
No.
These were physical abusers. They beat Michael's mother. They beat Michael. So to try and escape from this abuse, Michael would often retreat to a shed on the property as a youngster. When he was about 9 or 10 years old, one of these men, I don't know if it was a boyfriend of his mom's or, just a man that she was seeing, but he strapped Michael to a chair, duct taped his wrists to the chair, and set fire to his hand.
It's rough.
That's sadistic. Why the hell would you do that to a 9, 10-year-old boy? When he was 15 years old, another one of his mom's acquaintances, and I'm using that in air quotes,
right? Yeah,
attacked him with a fishing gaff. That's like that long pole with the sharp thing on the end that you pull fish out up into the boat.
Pull the big swordfish in with?
Yeah. And it gouged a huge hole in his hip. So obviously Michael Roy Toney didn't have a great childhood.
That's normally the story you hear behind one of our
killers
on the other podcast.
Yeah, on True Crime All the Time. He quit school before the 10th grade, and he left California, headed to Texas, eventually settling down in the Bedford area of Tarrant County. Now, we don't have a lot of information on Toney from the time that he got to Texas to 1985. But what we do know is that from 1985 on, he was in and out of jail. And in fact, in 97, when he was indicted and arrested, he was already in custody in North Texas on some burglary charges. Authorities came out and said that they had a very solid criminal case against Michael Roy Toney, and they moved forward with the case against him. Now, one of the things they did say, Gibbs, was they weren't sure if the Blount's house was the target for the briefcase. They admitted that it could have been delivered to the wrong location that day because apparently the trailer park where the Blounts lived was full of drug dealers. I mean, that was something that an ATF agent came out and said. He was quoted in a paper as saying that the trailer park was full of drug dealers. Now, Michael would say that he didn't do it, obviously. Said he had never been to the mobile home park, never even knew it existed until he was arrested. And on top of that, he said he didn't even know about the crime until 1987 when they started to try to pin it on him. So Michael's trial started in May 1999 in Fort Worth, Texas. On the stand, Susan and Robert Blount gave their testimony as to what happened that day. Toney's ex-wife testified, as did his ex-best friend, who was another one of his cellmates at one point in time. And it was probably Toney's ex-wife and her testimony that was the most damaging against him in the trial. So what she said was that she, Michael Toney, and his best friend, Chris Meeks, went to a propane shop that was next to the mobile home park. She said that Michael got out of the truck with a briefcase and disappeared. Then she said he returned without the briefcase and they went to a nature center and stayed there for several hours. Her testimony also included, Gibbs, that Michael Toney shot a beaver with a rifle while they were at the nature center. So again, I said it's pretty damaging, right? His ex-wife puts him, along with herself, but puts him next to the mobile home park with a briefcase,
Right.
at a place where propane is sold. It's not looking good after he's already said, hey, I've never been to this mobile home park. I don't know where it is. Well, his ex-wife is saying something different. And I think largely based on the testimony from his ex-wife, the jury found Michael Roy Toney guilty. He was convicted on May 20th, 1999. And then you get to the sentencing.
Yeah.
A second phase of the trial.
Yeah, because this was a fast trial, really.
It was.
Started in May, ended in May.
But there was a cellmate of Michael Toney, guy by the name of Finis Blankenship. He testified that Toney told him he was paid $5,000 to plant the briefcase bomb.
So someone's, if you're hurting, need some cash, and you're in that seedy world anyway, someone says, here's a briefcase, I need you to put it on the front door of this place. Here's $5,000 to do it. I guess, people would do that all the time.
I think a lot of people have done less for $5,000.
Absolutely, they have.
Now, this guy Finis also said that Toney told him the murders were part of a drug-related hit, but that the bomb was put on the doorstep of the wrong trailer. So like I said, this testimony all came in the second phase of the trial. But what it did was help the jury decide on sentencing.
Yeah.
And I think it helped show that Toney had a motive for the crime. And ultimately, the jury sentenced him to death. Now, at the time of trial, this guy, Finis Blankenship, was facing 2 counts of indecency with a child and a host of other criminal charges. And it would later come out, Gibbs, that he agreed to testify against Toney for having his charges dropped. He would say that his testimony was a complete lie. And then you have to talk about the testimony of Chris Meeks. He changed his story a number of times, and most of it didn't coincide with the testimony of Toney's ex-wife. At first, he told investigators that he didn't know anything about the bombing. He also failed a polygraph test. And then later in 2001, he signed an affidavit taking back the things that he said during his testimony. He said that my testimony about the events that happened on Thanksgiving Day, 1985, may not have happened on that day. So Gibbs, we're giving some things away here, right? Michael Roy Toney is going to appeal his conviction and his sentence. We're talking about things somewhat out of chronological order. These are going to come out later, but it leads us into his appeal. And as part of that appeal, Michael Roy Toney wrote a letter to a newspaper, and Gibbs, I think they helped him edit it somewhat, grammatical errors and things like that, but they helped him get it published.
Yeah, I think one of the reporters believed his story and wanted to see him be freed.
And in the letter, which we're going to read part of it, it's pretty long, so I don't think we can read it all, but in the letter, he lays out some of the reasons why there's no way he could have been guilty of this crime. So he starts out the letter saying, "My name is Michael Roy Toney. I'm on Texas death row waiting execution. I was convicted in May of 1999 of a bombing that occurred in Lake Worth, Texas on November 28th, 1985. The crime went unsolved for 14 years. The crime is still unsolved, but the case has been closed because of my conviction. To say my conviction and subsequent death sentence is a miscarriage of justice would be a definite understatement. I am innocent and can prove it. During the charade of my trial, no motive was proven. The entire trial centered on lies. There were only theories as to why the bombing happened and no evidence to support any theory. So he goes on to say, I spent Thanksgiving 1985 at my friend Chris Meek's home in Keller, Texas. Present that day were Chris, his mother, his stepfather, and his girlfriend. And we've already talked about Gibbs, Chris Meek's testimony, and the fact that he would later recant his testimony. So he goes on in the letter to say that he received a phone call from his girlfriend Kim, who he later married. This is the ex-wife that gave the testimony against him. And he says he left Keller, Texas by himself, left Chris Meek's home with his family, and went and met Kim and stayed with her the rest of the night. So obviously, all of this that he's saying, Gibbs, contradicts the stuff that came out in the trial.
Sure it does. From
both Chris Meeks and his ex-wife. And then Toney jumps ahead to 1997, where he claims he met a man named Benny Toole. And it was Benny Toole that actually told him about the Lake Worth bombing, gave him all the details about it, but he said he'd never heard about it before then. And it was those details, Gibbs, that he later told to Charles Ferris. And then the next thing he knew, he was indicted for capital murder, right? This is what he's saying in his letter. Toney goes on in his letter to talk about how, in the year and a half leading up to his trial, it was his idea to have investigators locate his ex-wife, Kim, and his old friend, Chris. He said he hadn't seen Kim since 1989, and he hadn't seen Chris Weeks since 1986. And remember, he didn't go to trial till 1999. But he says this really backfired on him because Kim and Chris became the state's star witnesses. They were essentially, Gibbs, their entire case. And we talked about it, right? In the beginning, Kim said she didn't know anything about this. And then all of a sudden she started to think about things. And, Toney says that she went to the library. She started reading newspapers. And at one point she realized that the bombing happened within a couple of miles of a place that the two of them had gone fishing one time. And that's when she talked about the nature center, the briefcase, the propane store, all of that, right? That was her testimony. And one other thing that we didn't mention, Gibbs, in her testimony, she said that on the night of Thanksgiving, that she, Mike, and Chris went fishing. So Mike says, number one, they didn't go fishing. They never left her apartment on the night of Thanksgiving. And one of the big things that he says in this letter is that, referring to his wife's testimony that he got out of his truck with the briefcase. He says he didn't even have that truck on Thanksgiving. He didn't buy it until the next month in December. And then he countered his ex-wife's claim that he shot a beaver at the nature center. And he said, again, I didn't own those rifles at that point in time. They were bought the next month in December. And apparently Gibbs, the ATF gun records, back that up. So he's making some really valid points in this letter. He's saying, how could I get a briefcase out from under a toolbox that was in the bed of a truck that didn't yet exist?
It's a good case to put forward.
And I sure couldn't shoot a beaver with a gun that didn't exist yet either. Yeah, you're right. Some really good points. He went on to say that both his ex-wife and Chris Meeks committed perjury, and they got an innocent man sentenced to death for a crime another man told me about. I was convicted solely by the lies of two people. In the letter, he also talks about his ex-wife, Kim, coming to the jail to see him. And he says that what she said to him was, I don't love you anymore, but I know you're not a murderer. I just assumed you did it because they told me you were a suspect and we went fishing at Lake Worth. I could be wrong about the date, but there's nothing I can do about that now. And there were parts of this letter, Gib, where he didn't make himself look really good, right? He talked about the fact that he was abusive. He was a terrible husband. He ran around on his ex-wife, and that's what he thought she used to help justify the things that she said. But he said, I was only 19 years old when we got married. I was way too young. I was naive. I was immature. But in wrapping up this letter, and it's a really long letter, he says, the Blount family deserves to know the truth, and they deserve the real murderers to be brought to justice. I've never in my life been to the scene of this crime. I didn't know the victims. I've never even seen a bomb. I told the exact truth, but it didn't make any difference. I believe the state and the ATF used me as a pawn to close a case they couldn't solve. Please help me. I may not be a perfect person, but I'm not a murderer. I've been in a lot of trouble since 1989, but nothing like this. Please help me expose the truth. Sincerely and respectfully, Michael R. Toney. So Michael Toney wrote this letter. It was published in the newspaper. But at the same time, his appeals were going on. He had a couple that were denied. But in one state habeas petition, his defense team produced evidence that the prosecution had withheld 14 documents that contained important evidence, contradicting the witness's testimony and suggesting that police had fed information to their witnesses. And it was on December 17th, 2008, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals overturned Toney's conviction. They ruled that prosecutors had wrongly withheld exculpatory evidence from the defense. And it was at that point that, officials had to make a decision. They had to figure out whether or not they were going to retry this guy. And ultimately, they decided not to. And Michael Toney was released from prison on September 2nd, 2009. Michael Toney released a statement through his attorney thanking his friends, his families, his lawyers. And he said, I have said all along that I was innocent of these charges. And I know that when the attorney general reviews the evidence, it will show that I am indeed innocent. So Michael Toney goes free, Gibbs. But just a month later, on October 3rd, 2009, he died.
Yeah, he did. Strangely, too.
Yeah, his truck veered off the road, overturned, and he was ejected from the vehicle and he died.
Yeah, kind of bizarre.
The whole thing is bizarre. I mean, if you think about it, right? And I don't want to lose sight of the people that died. That's important.
Absolutely.
Happened in 1985. But then you have what is essentially another victim in the form of Michael Toney, who spent a number of years of his life in prison for something that he didn't do. He finally fights and scratches and claws his way out, getting, his conviction overturned. He gets released, and within a month, he's dead. It's almost unbelievable.
Well, I think some people speculate or theorize that maybe whoever hired the person that placed the bombing maybe had something to do with this. There's all kind of theories that can wrap around this, more rabbit holes, that, or was it just chance, just fate? After a month he got out, his van veered for some reason off the road. And
oh, so you're talking about his actual death?
Yes.
That people theorize that whoever really did plant the bomb was involved in that part.
Yes.
Gotcha. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me. I'm still, the problem I have with this one is I'm still wondering about the briefcase bomb, right? It doesn't sound like it was meant for the Blounts. It sounds like the most logical theory is that, if there were as many drug dealers in this trailer park as the ATF said there were, it would make sense that it was meant for someone in the trailer park, but not the Blounts.
Right, yeah. Yeah, maybe it was meant for the trailer next door.
Right.
Or the one behind it or something. Yeah.
And, unfortunately, it was 15-year-old Angela that picked it up, brought it into the house, and opened it when it was meant for someone else. And maybe someday we'll know the truth, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and, see if anything comes out, develops from it.
But that's it. That is the case of the Blount family bombing.
Thanksgiving in 1985.
Yep. Happened on Thanksgiving. We got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to do those?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Hey, S. Checking in. I'm going to check in later, too, but I am listening to your Tammy Z, Sawicki, Unsolved, and you're at the grand jury standard burden of proof. And so as a defense attorney, I just got to pipe in here. It is probable cause. The grand jury must find. You can either do it by a grand jury or a preliminary hearing in front of a judge. Probable cause to believe a felony was committed and that the defendant committed it. There you have it. That's the standard. All right, stay safe. Keep your own time ticking. S out. Talk soon.
All right, that's the mysterious S. We always love it when he calls in.
Yeah, very, very knowledgeable.
Well, and he is a defense attorney, and he's told us that. I don't play all of his voicemails because he calls a lot. Sometimes he calls and leaves.
I have him on speed dial.
Yeah, I know you do.
Yeah.
In case you need him. But a lot of times he calls with information that's just meant for us.
Right.
But this is great information for everybody because, I'm sure it's related to something I got wrong in the episode.
Yeah.
Because I do remember us talking about the grand jury.
What is the minimal that they need to, take it from being something that the grand jury looks at to an indictment.
Yep. So that's great. We love when we get information from professionals.
Hey guys, it's Jerry. Just listening to the latest episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved, and you absolutely said the town Sarcoxy right. And the reason I know is I live probably 15 miles from there in Mount Vernon. I've never heard of this case before. I'm actually friends with several of the local sheriffs, and I'm going to have to ask them about it. So, yeah, absolutely got it right. This is very interesting to me. Mount Vernon has got a couple of trucking companies itself, and Springfield, Missouri is actually a very big trucking town. There are a bunch of companies there. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of it because I actually had to stop in the middle of it and call you to let you know I'm kind of excited. That's horrible to say, isn't it? So you guys have a good one, and as always, keep your own time ticking and keep up the good work, guys. Bye.
So that's our trucker buddy, Jerry.
Oh, yeah.
Calling us from the road, stopping the podcast in the middle to call us. He's so excited.
Well, because we said the name correctly.
Well, I thought we did. Jerry's saying we did, but I will tell you, I got
you got
conflicting information.
Well.
But this happens a lot with town names that I say, and a lot of times I'll say, well, I'm not sure it's either this or that. And I get a lot of conflicting information from people that allegedly live in the places we're talking about.
It happens all the time. People live in Illinois,
But those are two different places altogether.
Cousin, whatever.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. My name is Alex. I'm from Pennsylvania, and I wanted to call in because I wanted to tell you guys that I love your podcast. A friend of mine at work turned me on to it, and it's just amazing. I've been listening to it nonstop. And I actually had a suggestion for a case for you guys to look into, and it's one that's personal to me in a way because I'm related to the killer. It's the Lizzie Borden case. She killed both of her parents with an axe. And the kids would sing a song while she was on trial. It was Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her father 40 whacks. When her mother saw the job she'd done, she gave her mother 41. So it'd be a cool thing for you guys to look into. Because, I'm related to Lizzie Borden, so I think it'd be interesting to see. But love your guys' work. You guys do an amazing job with research. And keep your own time ticking, guys.
All right, love that. Yeah, Lizzie Borden's famous case. It's been on the list.
Lizzie Borden?
Lizzie Borden?
Yeah.
Yeah, what about it?
I'm just saying what you're saying.
Did you have a point?
No. I mean, I think most people know Lizzie Borden.
Yeah, you've heard of it.
Oh, absolutely.
Obviously.
Yeah. I mean, there's been
movies.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been on the list. We just haven't done it yet. But interesting that he's related to Lizzie Borden.
Yeah, I wonder where he is in the line of whatever that's called. Succession.
You are cracking me
Good
up.
stuff.
I know we got to do Gacy because you're related to Gacy. I know you've told me that.
Oh, quit clowning around.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Gibby. This is Angela Loeb, recent supporter of your show. Love it. Listen, I'm all the way caught up, and I can't get enough of it. But I did have a suggestion for True Crime All the Time Unsolved. It was a murder back in, 1994 in St. Louis, Missouri. Angie Hausman. She was stabbed to death, and they've never solved that case. And I remember vividly because my daughter had just been born, and I was, devastated. Love you guys. Best podcast. All of them. Criminology, love it all. And thanks. Be safe. Keep your own time ticking, and go Team Gibby. Bye-bye.
Team Gibby. I like that.
Team Bronchitis.
Yes, Team Bronchitis.
Today.
So,
obviously, Gibbs, the two episodes that come out, this one and TCAT at the same time, probably not going to have as much Gibbs as normal.
No.
You were a real trooper to power through.
It's hard to
episodes.
say much right now.
And, like I said, very lucid, very
lucid.
On the ball with your quick wit today.
Of course, as always.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Sean from California. I just wanted to say I adore your podcast, both of them, and I was sorry to hear about you getting laid off. However, by the time you got done talking about it, I really felt happy and kind of motivated myself. And when you say, are you ready to get into this episode? It's yeah. I think it probably gets us all excited. But anyway, I guess that was it. Love you guys. Take care. Keep your own time ticking and stay safe or whatever you say. Bye. Love you. Bye.
I love you too.
Yeah. I like how she says that at the end.
What?
Keep your own time ticking and stay safer or whatever you say.
Yeah. Now, we appreciate that voicemail. And I kind of had the same feeling of what she was just, the feeling that she had when
ready into the episode?
No, when she was talking about when I announced that I was laid off, I had the same feeling she had.
Yeah.
Which was, okay, at first feeling a little bad, a little down.
Right.
And then all of a sudden just started to get really excited about the possibilities. So
Yeah, you've been pretty amped up.
Yep. Can't wait. But that is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.